6. This will be the Audits Government Efficiency Committee meeting for Tuesday, January 8th. I am the chair, Councilmember Dennis P. Zine, and we also have chairs Bill Rosendahl, our committee members, I should say, Bill Rosendahl and Tom LeBonge. I understand our controller may be arriving on item number 1, so we're going to start at the request of the Department of Water and Power with number 3. Mr. Clerk, number 3.
Item number 3, Controller reports relative to the Controller's performance audit of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power's construction management practices.
Yeah, you'll need some support. Where'd Yancey go? She bailed, huh? Which one of you is retiring in a month? That's why you have the hot seat in the center.
I guess so.
How many years will it be?
31.
Oh, bless you. Good. The water's still flowing and the power's still on.
This is why I'm getting out now.
Okay, well, welcome. This was a controller report relative to the audit, water and power, and I understand we got the water side and the power side, and if you gentlemen will take it away and give us the review, and we'll go from there.
Okay. My name is Curtis Matthews, and we're engaged by the Controller's division to do this work, and essentially we would like to thank the Council for the opportunity to, and for the committee, and to do this performance audit. We basically conducted a performance audit covering the Department of Water and Power's construction management practices. And we had good cooperation, definitely, on the part of the department. I'll go through the observations we had this afternoon, and I will say that we have a response from the department that indicates that, that addresses, the recommendations we have and actions the department will take to address the recommendations that are provided in the report.
And then they disagree with one.
Yeah, there's one, it's categorized as a disagreement, has to do, and we'll get into it. I'll go through that.
So for the most part, there's an agreement with the department and the controller on the majority of the issues, but then there's that one area where there's a dispute.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Sure. So basically, I'm assuming that you've had a chance to review the report that we've issued. So, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the pages and pages of details that are included in the report. But essentially, overall, we found adequate controls over approval, change management, and payment for engineer, procure, and construction projects. We noted that for 85% of the dollar value of the projects tested, the contracts were properly authorized and executed, and did not exceed the DWP Board of Commissioners authorized expenditure levels. We also found that there were significant weaknesses regarding change management, covering internal projects. And we also observed that best practices and control improvements regarding estimating and scheduling and cost reporting are needed for the internal and outside EPC projects. And our testing noted inconsistent application and enforcement of procedures and controls relative to the projects we looked at. So in detail, on the bottom of page 2 of the report, I'll call your attention to that.
Why don't we hold a minute till my colleague, Mr. Rosendahl, gets seated. He's just arrived, and we'll wait till he gets seated, and then we'll continue with that.
Okay.
We on item which one, Mr. Chair?
We're on item number 3. We're going backwards.
Yeah, okay.
So we started with number 3. And the controller, Ms. Gruhl, may be arriving on the other matters, so we're going to hold those for her arrival.
Okay, great.
But this was number 3, the controller's audit of the Department of Water and Power construction management practices. And we just started as you arrived.
Great. You want me to make some comments? I can.
Oh, no, we're hearing, then we can make it a comment.
Okay, great.
We're just getting the opening information.
I don't know how to fix these chairs. Will you next?
You set?
I'm ready.
All right, okay, go ahead, please proceed.
Certainly. So just to revisit it a little bit, basically, we found, the department was cooperative in the conduct of the review. We're in agreement on all points with the exception of one. All recommendations we have agreement on. And we'd identified some good practices in the report, and we're going through the improvement opportunities right now. So on the bottom of page 2, some of the specifics is that the internal construction projects, projects that are conducted by the internal construction team tended to have they tended to exceed their budgets, basically, much more so than those where they're outside contractors. Another observation is...
What was that you just said about outside contractors?
The internal, there's a couple of methods in which the construction occurs here in the department. And one is that they have an internal team of people who go about doing construction work, and then they also have an external team. They hire external contractors who become part of the external team who conducts the work. And so where external contractors were involved, there was less budgets exceeded. I mean, there was much more incidence in the projects we selected, in the scope of the work that we did, there's more budgets exceeded on those projects that were internally constructed, where the construction work was done by internal workers. That was our observation. The next observation has to do with policies and procedures and compliance and consistent practices. What we observed when we came in and looked at what we were auditing is that we found that there were, on one side of the organization, the procedures they were using were, they were inconsistent. There was some, in terms of coverage regarding areas of risk that need to be covered by procedures. On the other side of the house, there was a draft table of contents. There really weren't any documented procedures at all. I mean, essentially, it was just a draft that had been worked on for 2 years, and that's, mentioned in the report. So clearly, we're making recommendations regarding the fact that, for us to have for the organization here to have best practices, given the amount of money that you're spending here, there needs to be good, solid policies and procedures in place. Inconsistent and incomplete record retention is another observation. We found a number of, as we did our project, we found when we asked for certain key documents that we would expect to see on a construction project, we weren't unable to receive those documents. They just weren't present. Documentation wasn't present to document key parts of the construction process.
Did you ever find them?
No.
Okay.
There's just a number of instances of that.
When the controllers arrived.
Okay. So the next item is that, this is a best practice, but all these relate to, opportunities for improved efficiency and effectiveness. And one of the good practices that we would expect to see is the tracking of what's called soft versus hard construction costs. And soft costs meaning management, indirect costs, administrative costs, overhead costs, that type of thing, versus actual brick and mortar construction activity, building structures, renovating structures, doing that type of thing, versus the indirect costs. And you want the goal of the organizations that I've worked at through the years, and our firm have tended to want to reduce the amount of indirect costs and increase the amount of direct costs. So having metrics around that, managing that is a good practice, so we recommend, and so we put that in the report. The other is the cost estimates. This is a pretty important thing. Is when you're when budgets are being established, it's critical to have good cost estimates upon which those budgets are based. That way you have a good baseline by which to compare the actual construction cost to. And we found that there was insufficient information to document and support, getting down to the documentation, to support the budget estimates that are being prepared and used to measure success or not lack of success on a given project in terms of cost management. The other, just kind of working down the list of observations, the internal projects, the projects as I was talking about earlier that are performed by the internal teams of people who do the construction work, the change order management controls, weren't consistently applied. They weren't particularly, there's gaps in those controls, basically. Now, the department has procedures around certain of these controls, and a lot of the procedures weren't consistently followed regarding them. And that's really important to have good, obviously, in any construction project, you've got to have good change order control, really understand the scope of what's changed and understand the cause of the change and be able to make decisions about alternatives you may want to pursue. So we're recommending improved change order controls over internal projects. Detailed financial information. First of all, the system that the people are using to manage costs on the projects is not really a great system at all, for managing internal construction project cost. It has a lot of gaps in terms of the level of detail and cost that's being provided to your team here that's conducting that work. And we didn't find a lot of good project cost reporting at the project level. We expected to see schedule of values, the different items that are being constructed, good cost information regarding that and how the projects were being the costs were being accumulated on the project, and then good review of budget versus detailed estimate on the work that's being performed, and good analysis regarding project costs, and it just was fell below the standard, and we're recommending improvements in that area.
And they agree with that.
Yeah. The next item is internal controls documentation over project reporting processes was inconsistent, relating to cost information, relating to, I was talking about budgeting and versus actual cost and having a good budget and monitoring along the way. We think there is opportunity for improvement in that area as well. In addition to that, we did find that constructability and value engineering analysis was conducted on one of the projects that we selected. However, we do, the criteria for when you're going to decide on when to use value engineering, when to do constructability reviews on the projects is not stipulated. And we're recommending that there be more structure around when to do that and to benefit from it. There can be tremendous benefits from stepping back and looking at where can we save money before you actually do your construction work. The last item here has to do with scheduling, your scheduling process. We did find schedules on the projects that we looked at. Our point here is that schedules need to be established much earlier in the process. A baseline needs to be clearly delineated. Success in terms of achieving project schedule needs to be identified, and then measurement against that baseline is necessary. Now, to go back to the point where we have a difference, I guess, the response is considered to be different versus not complete agreement with our recommendation. That had to do with the need for a common manual. We identified multiple controls that apply to both water and power projects.
Duplicate control.
The same control would apply to both. It would benefit both sides. And as we looked at that, we looked at the fact that there is a draft manual on one side, and the other side doesn't have a complete manual. We're not getting good documentation for what we're looking at. So in our heart of hearts, we recommended that there would be a combined manual. It'd be more efficient to have one manual to cover multiple controls. You have opportunity for more consistency. We saw an opportunity there, I think, in the department's response, and you guys will talk to it, I'm sure. But basically, I think they have indicated that they'll issue bulletins, for common controls and areas where they'll benefit, and basically they felt like they're better served, given the way they manage their projects, by having two separate manuals. So that's the only item of difference, really, in our recommendations that we had with the department,
That was the
basically.
only disagreement.
That's the only disagreement, yes, sir.
Everything else they either agreed upon or working on or going to implement soon. With the recommendations. I have a question regarding that. We'll get to that. Anything else on your side?
No, that's it.
Okay. From the department?
I'm John Dennis. I'm in the Power Exec office, and I have a few comments, and then Glenn will follow up with a few items
We got to
in
pick on the guy
response.
who's retiring, though. We got to, he doesn't get to go to the hot seat.
We'll end strong here. Of the items that we had in here, there are 21 items that were addressed in the audit.
Right.
And again, we see these as all opportunities for improvement in our process. Certainly, it's good for an outside view of what's happening at the department. We would like to point out on page 2 of the Moss Adams report that 85% of the dollar value of the projects tested were all property authorized and executed, and they did not exceed the DWP Board Commissioners' authorized expenditure levels, and contract payments were equal to or less than the authorized contract value. So we'd like to see this as we come through this with 85% of that value coming in with a strong B or a B+.
Right.
And that the area of improvement is our in-house construction forces. And just a quick note on that, with our in-house forces, construction forces, there's a great advantage that they provide to the department as opposed to an outside contractor. As you're full aware, we're doing some very large projects of rehab and renewable projects and once-through cooling and doing
Billion-dollar projects.
You're absolutely right. And so we see those particular projects are pretty well standalone particular projects that we can have contractors that know that kind of repetitive sort of work, and they can do that work very well. It's where those systems interface with the rest of our power system that's very delicate, or even where we go into our energized or operating facilities where we need to do capital improvements. And that's a great advantage of our in-house construction forces. There are times where we may get inclement weather, a big heat wave, a storm comes through, and we've just got to pull our crews off so that we can just make sure the system is just running and not make any changes. Then we're not subject to change orders and claims by a contractor. We have our in-house forces. So there's a great balance of using our in-house forces there, and that flexibility provides us a great strength for not only in our operating facilities and having them trained for that, but also for safety tagging and also for as-found conditions. Sometimes as we start to go through our equipment that might be as much as 100 years old, we're finding new stuff that's in there that once they start to excavate and tear that apart and do the repair work, that they need to do more. And so our in-house forces work very well for that. But what we did in response to the audit and some of these items that we learned even as we're going through here is that we put together a project management executive team with water, power, and joint personnel for our executives and a 10-member team. And our focus is really, as what was identified here in this particular audit, of project controls. And with the project controls, there's kind of 4 key areas of scope, schedule, cost, and quality. And certainly safety rides above all that. But making sure that scope, schedule, cost, and quality, that those are all addressed properly, even from the beginning and the initial stages of the project. So with that, we did identify a particular area. We have 2 different areas of control with water and the power system. There are some areas that we disagreed with the idea of joining those. But we saw the opportunity instead is that let's find that common ground, put together this project executive team, and identify those key controls for all projects across the board. And so we do have a collaborative effort going across the whole department for those, the approval and review and the control of projects. That's our commitment for this quarter here, early in 2013, and then to have those controls in place for the duration of the other projects. And that way we'll be aligning our review and our cost control. There's another piece that's coming forward with regards to some of our financial reporting and some mechanisms, and our Chief Financial Officer is working with our Chief Information Officer for our future financial reporting mechanism. So that That's something that's yet to come, and some of that software, and I believe that will also help address some of these joint needs that we have in our power system for controlling and monitoring costs. So those are major items that we had, and we believe that we've addressed in this initial triage that we have, a response with the project team, addressed most, if not all, of those 21 items in this initial effort, so that we have controls in place and addressing those items that have been brought up in this particular audit.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, he talked about the internal.
Your name for the record.
I'm sorry, Glenn Singley. I'm the Director of Water Engineering and Technical Services, so.
Soon to be retired.
Soon to be retired.
You got to add that because we can't pick.
That's right. Okay. So some of the challenges for these internal projects are that they're not always well-defined, and sometimes before a project has been fully, completely designed or 100% designed and a package put out, we have a certain need of getting that construction started. And so that's some of our challenge of doing this in stages and not having a good package and a good baseline to compare to. But we need to correct that and do as many complete designs for our internal projects and our internal forces as we can, because we know that does tend to help with those bottom line numbers of the schedule and the cost. So we take that as good advice. We need to do better on that, and that's part of where we're trying to go with this. A lot of things that were found were in process, and we've got a lot of detailed cost control information that we're using on all of our current projects. Some of the projects that were identified were projects that were completed a couple of years ago. And so the things that we've been doing in the last year or two weren't always identified as they looked at those specific projects and didn't find the material that they wanted. We are very keen on making sure that we have, from the early planning stages, a good schedule to start off with and a good estimate up front, and we're documenting that and have a place to put that documentation. Then as we get into design, we get a 30% design, we do another estimate, and we note the change from the initial planning stage to that preliminary design. What were the changes that made for a change in the dollar amount or the schedule, and why? And document that, so for each project, we'll have that information in a consistent place that we can go back and look at it.
And it'll continue the flow.
And we'll continue the flow all the way through construction and then even through post-construction. So I think that's going to be a key part of what we want to do.
Project delivery process.
Here's just a simple illustration, and it's been illustrated well, and it was referenced in the audit about a gate process. But as it goes, a project goes from a preliminary or a concept all the way through final planning and then detailed design, and then it gets into construction. And I think one of the big areas here that was of concern is to make sure we have a clear baseline reference estimate and scope of the project before you start construction. Again, as Glenn has indicated, is sometimes we can't wait. There are some jobs that you have a blowout or something has to happen and get your system restored, and you just have to fast track, or you engineer and construct at the same time to just get that job done and get a system restored and put into place. So that's where, again, we just need to work with some of those
That's
controls.
on both sides, the water side and the power side.
Absolutely,
You never
it
know.
happens.
And it's an aging system.
And we just got to make sure the water flows and the lights stay on.
One thing that was mentioned was our old financial system and the reporting system that we do have. That creates some challenges. We have some different tools that we've adapted on the power side and on the water side to address those, and they don't match exactly. And so I think this was some of the genesis of these two reports. I think ultimately it would make sense to have one report and one mechanism, one process that's the same. Right now, we have a different methodology of looking at our scheduling and tracking those costs than the power system. So in effect, we have to have a few things that are different that hopefully will roll up to decision-making tools that are common for both sides.
Okay.
So that's, I think, the genesis of that comment from us of having these two different reports. And with the hope, I think, for, when we do get into our new financial system, we'll be able to share those common practices and get everything in sync.
So we're talking 1.8 billion, 1.6 billion. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars for these very expensive projects that serve more 4 million people. So it's It's many links to that chain to deliver that service on the water side and the power side on a consistent basis, not just as we feel like it's necessary all the time. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain or shine. So no, and I think that when you look at the results, there's obviously not perfection, but 2 of the recommendations considered implemented, 12 in progress, 6 not yet implemented, and you've got that one disagreement that we're trying to come to a happy medium when it comes to the projects on the water and the projects on the power. You've got some manual direction for the delivery of service. So the audit did prove out that there's some improvements that can be made.
Absolutely, yes.
We're not talking about waste, fraud, and abuse and expenditures of funds in an inappropriate fashion. That it was done obviously to serve the benefit of the folks that are customers of the Department of Water and Power on both water and power sides.
Yes.
So I want to commend you for your diligence in keeping the water flowing for over 30 years.
Thank you.
Rain or no rain, you've
There
kept
we
it
go.
moving. So I mean, that's a great career with the city. We wish you well with that.
Appreciate that.
Mr.
Yeah.
Rosendahl.
First of all, thank you very much for what you've done. We appreciate it very much. You know, from day one, I've been talking about gold in the gutter. And when it came to DWP, it was very clear that we had at least $100 million worth of properties in one form or another that needed to be evaluated and see if it's property we should keep or property we should sell. And if we sell it, what implications does it have for our overall strength and energy of DWP? Then we, the people, put on the ballot measure a position, consumer advocate. Dr. Fred Pickle became the fellow that got the position. I don't see Fred Pickle's hands on this or fingerprints on this, or even know if he has an opinion of this or should have an opinion on this. So I just like to throw that out. Where does Pickle stand in the mix of this particular moment as we're having this conversation?
I'll defer. Yeah.
I'm Phil Leiber, the department's chief financial officer. I can't speak for Dr. Pickle, but I would say this, that he's given us a number of recommendations, and in fact, those recommendations have been put in the form of a motion adopted by the council, and several of those recommendations are very relevant to this issue. They speak to the need to look at all of our business processes, improve our controls, get more efficient over time. So he certainly has a general interest in matters of this nature. He did not get involved in this particular audit, given that much of this work took place right in the midst of our rate case, and Dr. Pickle, to date, doesn't have a staff to support his efforts. So in his first year of operations, his office's involvement in matters like this is probably more limited than it will be in the future.
Tell me about the staff that he doesn't have or should he have. Explain that to me.
I understand that he is looking to recruit a full-time staff, and ultimately, several months from now, he hopes to have his department fully staffed with about 5 people, but to date, he's just been fairly reliant on outside consultants, PA Consulting, to help him. And the funding for their work was limited to the rate case matters.
So in terms of processes, the processes we're talking about are establishing good budgets. I mean, regardless of the status of whether a project is fast track or not, we need to be able to find a budget. And we need to see a basis for that budget. We're looking at it. And so there's dollars on the table there. You talk about, the process, in response to your question, in terms of improved processes within the department, if you were talking about procedures to make the city, more effective and efficient, the Department of Water and Power particularly, or in terms of looking at change control over internal projects, where we're getting the most situations where we've exceeded the budget, which was not great at the best in the first place because we can't find support for it. In those situations where we have good change order control, there's dollars on the table and there's an opportunity to improve. So I think as you look at every recommendation in this report, there's an opportunity there's dollars related to it ultimately. This is ultimately all related to dollars in some way.
And the department agrees with you.
We agree.
And they agree, and they're taking action on it, from what I understand.
Obviously, it's the key that they're taking action, that they agree, everybody is on the same wavelength, but 34% is disturbing. There's just no question in my mind. It's also disturbing for me that Dr. Pickle, the whole point of Dr. Pickle, was a constituent advocate that everybody was comfortable with. The fact that he doesn't have a staff is a disgrace. He should have a staff. Those are the first 5 people that should have been hired, so that he can go forward and be given the leadership role that we, the people, decided to put this guy in.
Well, Mr. Roosevelt, I don't want to get off the subject
No.
that we have here, but Dr. Pickle's been in operation over a year, and you would think that in that period of time, you'd have a staff. I don't want to belabor the point.
You're right.
There's an issue that we need to address
That's right.
on that, but that's not pertinent to this particular situation. So can we get back to this one?
Sure,
I know
as
our
long as we
controller
go back
has
to
some
the
comments. but she needs to go through.
34%, yeah. The controller, obviously, with the 34%, is making a very big statement there, which I look forward to her reaction to us on this.
So I know that Controller Gruhl is here. She has another appointment she needs to make, but if we can wrap this one up. Controller, do you have any comments on 3, or you wait for number 1?
No, but I'd be able to, on
Number 1, okay. So if we can wrap this up, if there's any more comment
No, let's
on
leave it at that.
number 3. So the one issue that we have a disagreement, we're coming to a resolution. The other areas, we're going to be tighter on it. The flow chart, we're going to make sure it's done right. You're going to enjoy retirement, and you're going to look back and you say, the water kept running and the power stayed on.
Right.
So you did your accomplishment for those 30-plus years. So thank you very much. We will note and file this report. We thank the firm of Moss Adams for completing this on behalf of the controller. So we thank you very much, gentlemen, and we are now going to move on to number 1.
Item number 1, City Attorney Report and Ordinance relative to amending Los Angeles Administrative Code Section 20.60 et sec regarding the Controller's Fraud, Waste, and Abuse Unit to require department reporting of fraud, waste, and abuse and employee fraud awareness training. This matter has also been referred to the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee and the Rules, Elections, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee.
You know what, I apologize. We had a card, Daniel Weissman, I see in audits in general. I didn't see the DOP audit. Dr. Weissman? All right, okay, we'll have you come up after. We'll let you throw both in there. Okay, so we'll hear, and then we'll go on
Great.
to Dr. Weissman. So I apologize for the delay. We delayed because of your arrival, and
That's all right. No, not at all. And I'm pleased to be here and that you were listening and hearing the DWP audit that we did on contracting. And as both of you said, this is a lot of money. We want to make sure that we're doing it in the proper way, that there are checks and balances, and that we can learn from the, I don't know if mistakes, but some of the challenges to all the rest of the departments, which leads me to the item that you have before us. The motion that was introduced a few years ago, we had pushed and actually asked the council to consider strengthening the waste, fraud, and abuse ordinance, particularly for a number of reasons. First and foremost was you do learn from others' mistakes. And what we were finding is we were reading about stories in the paper of waste, fraud, and abuse that were never shared with some of the other, not only elected officials, but waste, fraud, and abuse unit. We can learn from those mistakes, and we can ensure that other departments are not making the same kinds of mistakes as well. That means saving of money. That means looking at that waste, fraud, and abuse. The second part of it is ensuring that our employees know that from the top down, the importance of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. If they see something, that they should understand that it is their responsibility to report that. And the importance, as we have identified over $160 million of waste, fraud, and abuse in the city of Los Angeles, that we believe that this should be a partnership with our employees, but also a responsibility and a requirement that they provide that information. We have worked long and hard with the City Attorney's Office, the LAPD, the Ethics Commission, and our office to find something that ensured that if there's something, of course, that is of a criminal nature, they need to report it to the LAPD. But that there are other items in the confidentiality of our office and our waste, fraud, and abuse unit, that information is shared with us as well. It is not an unusual position. We do that frequently on ethics issues in Los Angeles with our City Ethics Commission. We meet fairly regularly with their staff. This is modeled after the County of Los Angeles actually has some of this language as well. And that was one of the meetings I had initially when I got elected, was talking to the county and their controller and auditor about things that they were doing. And this was one issue that we thought was important, and we had prime examples of where we read about it in the paper. You may recall even one recently, which was in the housing department, where they were in fact taking bribes and all of that, and trying to take money from individuals, and we never knew about that until we read it in the newspaper. That's not okay. Our job and the responsibility that we have as elected officials and as general managers is to ensure that we avoid any waste, fraud, and abuse. This ordinance will help strengthen it. We think it's important as well to have the kind of training that is critical so that employees understand what their rights and responsibilities are, that general managers understand that. And I know we want to work together with personnel and ethics and our office to ensure that that happens, to put that information out there. So I have staff that are present here today, both Farad, who is head of my auditing division, and others are present to be able to answer any questions. But I wanted to be here today because this has been an important issue for me to ensure that everyone knows that we are watching and that people will be held responsible and we will learn from people's mistakes.
Well, one of the issues is when it becomes a criminal nature, the Los Angeles Police Department takes that over, they do the investigation. Part of the recommendation includes the LAPD, and after reviewing this, we felt, and after speaking with the representatives from the department, that the LAPD can be notified when it's appropriate, but many of these activities are administrative.
Correct.
Where there's administrative process, administrative discipline, there's a civil service commission, there's a whole process in place that doesn't involve a criminal nature, but it could involve waste, fraud, or abuse, but not elevate to the misdemeanor or a felony or whatever the case may be. So
Absolutely.
What the recommendation that we wanted to do was remove the LAP with their concurrence, but always available for advice, always available for recommendation. But the fact is, between the Controller's Office and the Ethics Commission, with the staff that we have available, with the department representatives, the general managers, to do what they need to do in administering that aspect of waste, fraud, abuse on an internal, on administrative. But originally, the police department was included in there. If it doesn't rise to the level of a crime, misdemeanor or felony, which is what they're concerned with, then it stays within the family of the city, and it could go to a civil service commission for a hearing, administrative discipline that would take place.
And I think the issue was ensuring that we never left LAPD out, that people thought, well, they called the Waste, Fraud, and Abuse Unit rather than LAPD, so.
Right. So you're in agreement with that
I'm agreeing.
for the LAPD
Yeah,
aspect?
we also meet, Ferret's a private controller, we also meet with LAPD on a monthly basis. We refer issues to them if we believe they are in criminal nature. So they are in the loop in terms of receiving and identifying issues related to their jurisdiction.
Because right now, when you look at who's accountable, the general manager, in my opinion, would be accountable for those department personnel. They'd have to report it through channels. The general manager would then be responsible, that we would then hold responsible. And if, in fact, the general manager is not responsible, then there's the position of the mayor to tell that general manager, you're not performing your duties as a general manager running that department.
And I think the biggest issue for this is if you find in your department, for example, that someone is stealing money and they're using the cash count ways in which they do it, and it gets reported to LAPD solely, then we don't know and can't say, wait a minute, that kind of cash interchange, it also happens in Recreation and Parks Department, in the Library Department, whatever. We could use that as an example and a way in which to change the policies and procedures to ensure it doesn't happen again. And that's really our intent, is to ensure that we are sharing, that we are one city, and that particularly we created this Waste, Fraud, and Abuse Unit, and the importance of having that kind of connection is critical.
And it's to hold folks accountable and responsible, and the dedicated city employees who do their job every day, that follow the rules, that don't get involved in anything unethical, unreasonable, illegal. We want to compliment them, but there are those, history has shown,
Absolutely.
in different departments where we've had these situations that have crossed that line into waste, fraud, and abuse, and some on a larger scale than others, but what they are doing is then ripping off the taxpayers one way or another.
Right.
So,
So thank you, and they can talk further, but this was really something that was important, and nice to see you, Bill.
before you leave,
Glad you're doing well.
questions for the controller?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Waste, fraud, and abuse is a good slogan. I obviously believe that any waste, fraud, or abuse is a no-brainer. The person should be nailed, period. I'm going to wait for Daniel Weissman's comments, because I love my neighborhood councils too, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same wavelength. If you came up with the stat of 34% before our issues, well, that's obviously a no-brainer. That's the goal in the gutter I want to pick up as best we can. When you talk to the county and they told you there was abuse and that there was criminal activity involved, how did they ferret that out? What did they do? implications can you get from that can help us here?
Well, what the county did was there was a reporting mechanism. There was a requirement that you actually had to report it to their offices, which is the model for what we're looking at here today, so that they could, again, then take that and say, in X department, we see the same things happening. We see the same red flags. Let's make sure it doesn't occur again. But if that communication had not occurred, we would have not known about it. That general manager of a department would have gone on their merry way and said, I took care of it. You did maybe for your department, but let's look how we do this as one city.
And how do you encourage people who see something going on to make the call to the hotline, that they're going to be protected, they're going to be, we're going to worry about them, we're going to keep an eye on them, so that by them saying what they told somebody, there's no back.
No, they're confident. We have had numerous reports that we put out in audits that have been based on a waste, fraud, and abuse hotline complaint, and those anonymous complaints, we protect those individuals and stand very strongly for that position.
The same with the Ethics Commission.
Correct.
Anonymous complaints, Ethics Commission does the investigation, they don't release the information on who generated that complaint.
Great. Cool. Well, I applaud you.
Thank you very much. Yes, no. We're excited about this going forward and appreciate all of the departments, sitting through and figuring out the best way to ensure that we are responsible in what we're doing, but most importantly, we're holding people accountable.
Great. And if we could have Daniel come up and then...
Oh, no, not yet. Let's hear it from our city attorney and our city attorney's representatives.
Good afternoon, council members. Deputy City Attorney Renee Stottle. I'll just summarize the ordinance briefly. I'm sure that you're familiar with it, and it reflects what the controller just said. What the ordinance does is it strengthens the reporting requirement for departments to report fraud, waste, and abuse. It also defines for the first time what we mean by fraud, waste, and abuse for purposes of the reporting requirement. That doesn't mean that other things that seem like fraud, waste, and abuse can't voluntarily be reported, but the requirement has a definitional aspect to it now.
All three have a specific definition.
Yes. The reporting requirement, as you mentioned, the way it's written currently is that the departments are required to report to the controller, to the Ethics Commission, and to LAPD concurrently as soon as they determine that there is fraud, waste, and a fraud, waste, and abuse allegation. There is also a training requirement for all full-time employees on fraud awareness.
By the Ethics Commission.
The way it's written now, it's training sponsored by the Controller's Fraud, Waste, and Abuse Unit.
We are currently working with personnel and ethics to come up with a training, and that's something needs to be developed.
Whose responsibility is it going to be? The regard to the employee training, the fraud, waste, and abuse, why is responsibility the controller? Shouldn't it fall with ethics as part of the mandatory ethics training for all city employees every 2 years? We do that training with the Ethics Commission. Maybe it could be a joint operation between ethics, don't be shy, and controller. They both have responsibilities, but I know that we have certain responsibilities under the law on ethics training for city employees. There's the sexual harassment training, other training that's required by law. How would it work within your shop versus the controller, or do we split it and then no one's in charge?
Well, Heather Holt for the Ethics Commission. It would
Your name
create...
for the record.
I'm sorry?
Your name for the record.
Heather Holt for the Ethics Commission.
Executive Director.
Yes. It would create some resource issues for us. There are costs associated with developing training and maintaining it, ensuring that it continues to be up to date. And we don't have those resources. We also don't have the expertise that the Controller's Office has in terms of explaining what the issues are with regard to waste, fraud, and abuse, because those issues are not squarely within our jurisdiction. It could be, the requirement to take the training could be added to the Governmental Ethics Ordinance, which would give us the authority to enforce administratively against anyone who fails to take the training.
Could it be an online program, an online training?
I don't think it's specified at this point. It probably could be. One thought that we had is if the concern is to ensure that both trainings are available in a single place so that it's as convenient for city officials as possible to take the trainings, we are currently working with the personnel department to transfer the governmental ethics training into a training framework that they have already established, which houses trainings for a variety of issues across the city. That might be one way to address the issue. In that case, the Controller's Office would continue to provide the input with regard to content and any resource issues that would be associated with creating or maintaining it.
Personnel Department here? What do you think? That okay?
Sounds great.
There you go. Thank you very much. No, I think when you think about the ethics, you think of the Ethics Commission and the Controller's Office and that, then you think of Personnel Department. Personnel Department is the broad umbrella for everything, and I think if we could do something with IT, information technology, and it would be a mandatory where they'd have to take it, they'd have the tests as they have in other programs, and that way we have it documented. You could take it at your desk, but to take 30-plus thousand city employees and send them through training, that is a very cumbersome task, if not impossible. So I think if we could develop something with the Personnel Department, with the inclusion of the ethics, inclusion of the city attorney, inclusion of the controller, and come up with some format, and then they'd understand the definition, the requirements, the demands, and that way everybody can be on the same page, as we have other mandatory training that city employees have to take. So I think including the Personnel Department with the IT assistance, obviously, no one has the personnel to go out and do all this training, but through the IT, we can do that citywide. You've got a 24-hour city it's not feasible to take 30,000 people and put them in the Coliseum and have them pay attention and learn anything. It's just not going to work. So with the technology we have, I would suggest with the personnel inclusion and everybody come together, obviously the city attorney's office with the definition, and we could have it, whatever the time, half-hour program that they could key up in their computer, have it, take the test, boom, now we've got them trained, and now they can't say, I don't know.
Yeah, I know we can't take action until after the public speaks, but I certainly support you on this. This would be the right thing to do and build it in.
Well, the police department, Chief, if I'm not mistaken, has that for officers for interpreter training, where they can go online and catch up with what they need to do with the police department. Because it's really not realistic to take 9,000 officers to the academy and train them with all the responsibilities. So it's a technology that's been proven effective. It holds them accountable. So I think we can move forward in that direction with everyone's participation in drawing up what we need to have drawn up in this waste, fraud, and abuse training for everyone, so they can't say, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman,
What was that? Yes.
Paul Smith, CLA. Would you like the committee report to reflect that recommendation as a recommendation going?
Yeah, that's how, I think that's the most effective way to train the personnel. And we have a new IT general manager that was authorized, approved today, who has a lot of experience. So I think that would work for everyone's benefit, because there's no way that you can take your one-man army over here and say, go out there and train everybody. It's not going to work. Okay. Go ahead and continue. Was there anything else that you had,
No, that was my only thought on that.
Renee?
Nothing further. We're available to answer any questions that you might have.
Z-Woman?
I'm available to answer any questions.
You always are. We thank the city attorney's office for pulling this together. I think it's very comprehensive. When we look at the actions, what I'd like to do, remove LAPD from the ordinance. If we could remove them as an entity from that particular ordinance, even though they're available, but require the departments to report allegations of fraud, waste, or abuse within 5 to 10 days upon knowledge of an allegation. So we put a time frame on there, 5 to 10 days. After that department, the general manager becomes aware. Require the Ethics Commission to conduct mandatory waste, fraud, abuse training to coincide with mandatory ethics training every 2 years. Well, instead of require the Ethics Commission, require the Personnel Department with the assistance of the Ethics Commission and the City Attorney's Office and the Controller to establish that online training, so everyone within the city family would be trained, and then we would have that mandatory ethics training upon hiring, and then every 2 years, because then we could update any kind of programs that we need to update. And now we've got some teeth that we long hold need to have with this situation of waste, fraud, and abuse within the city. Report time, 5 to 10 days as soon as allegation is made. Well, 5 to 10 days or as soon as allegation is made. We'd rather have that, 5 to 10 days or as soon as allegation is made, but no more than 10 days once they become aware. Report time, 5 to 10 days or as soon as allegation is made. So now we hold the general manager responsible. And the form would be through the general manager and through the process when it comes up to who's responsible. So if it's this department or that department, and I don't think a lot of folks know that there is an administrative process for discipline, and that's what the Civil Service Commission does. They hear those cases. So when the department general manager says, I don't have any authority, well, they do have authority. There's a whole disciplinary process in place for employees. The police department has their Board of Rights hearing. There's a Civil Service Commission for other city employees. There is a disciplinary process in place, and they can go for anything from a reprimand to suspension or to termination, similar to what the police department has. Everybody hears about the Board of Rights, but there is a similar focus on all city employees that don't fall under the police department guidelines. Fire department has their own also, but then there's the Civil Service Commission, which administers that discipline, which I don't think a lot of people know exists, because you say, we've had a situation, well, what was done to the employee? We don't know. Well, there's hopefully the general manager, but Overman would do action because he knows that there's something to be done within the personnel department and the city ethics commission and, right, Bud?
Yes, sir.
See, I knew you'd say yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Zine,
we-
may I ask a
Sure.
question? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
In terms of the teeth and the accountability portion of this, were you interested in adding the training requirement to the governmental ethics ordinance, which would allow the ethics commission to administratively enforce failure to comply with the training?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So with that, if we can have Dr. Weissman come forward, and Dr. Weissman, your comments on this matter, and we'll do public comment at the end, but if you want to comment on this particular subject, Dr. Daniel Weissman,
Thank you so much.
born to allow you.
With a little permission, that's what she's saying. The public comment at the end may not be necessary. First of all, my personal support for the ideas that have just been coming forward. I'll introduce myself to those in back of me here as the
Who doesn't know
secretary.
Dr. Weissman? They all know you, Doc,
They're all getting my emails already?
or I must
Okay.
be. Or you were the pediatrician who delivered them, one or the other.
That's also a possibility. Anyway, this is an issue that I'd like to take as a case in point. What we have is fraud, waste, and abuse, and obviously motherhood and apple pie we're in favor of, and those three we're not. But I want to add three more words to that. We're opposed to opacity. We're opposed to inefficiency, and we're opposed to lack of definition.
Lack of what?
Lack of definitions.
Definition?
All right. As the current chair of what has been named after your committee, sir, the Audits Committee of the Budget Advocates, we're in the process also of looking at all of the audits, including the one that's before you now. And we would like the opportunity to make some formal presentations to you as time permits and as subject justifies. I put those last three ideas in because I've heard the word said. Opacity is to be opposed and transparency is to be, its opposite member is to be forwarded. The inefficiencies that we have are sometimes not fraud and abuse, they're just inefficiencies. And we need to move toward as much efficiency as we can. And I'm sorry to say that all of my experience with the budget advocates, which you know goes back for about 4 or 5 years now, leads me to believe that we do not have a good definition of what the city is supposed to do. We do not have a good workload analysis of the city. We know how many employees we have, and every year when we go to the budget process, we decide how many employees are we going to have next year, given the amount of money we have to spend. If we knew how much we had to do, we might not be happy with the news, and we might find how far behind we really are, or we might be able to commend those departments who are keeping up with their real responsibilities. But that would, I think, change our attitudes tremendously.
Doc, if you can conclude, please.
I'll try to conclude right now by saying that there's been a new set of officers of the Los Angeles Neighborhood Council Coalition. You've probably received, and I know you have because I sent you to some documents this morning, and others may want to see it, regarding the opportunities for the neighborhood councils to weigh in on these matters. So may I ask you, as people who've been on the education and neighborhoods committees and have been as close to your neighborhood councils as any members of our council, to start the process by which we can bring formal presentations to you. And I'll
More than happy to.
be glad to work with you.
We'd be more than happy to. Renee, if I could have
I
you...
want to hear that again.
I said we'd be happy to.
Oh,
I'd be happy
best
to.
words
I'm sure you
we've
would
heard
too,
all day.
so.
I certainly agree. We'd both be happy.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
happy.
That'll go to our meeting this evening, and
Thank you.
thanks for hearing.
Thank you, our pleasure.
The more open the process is, the happier we are.
As far as the definitions, what I'd like to have our city attorney representative, Renee, read to us fraud, waste, and abuse, so everyone understand what we're talking about, the definitions that we prescribe for this, please.
The definitions are the following. Fraud is defined as an intentional act or omission designed to deprive the city of its resources to which the individual or person is not entitled, including but not limited to making false statements, submitting false documents, withholding or misrepresenting material facts, bribery, or unauthorized disclosure of confidential procurement documents. Waste is defined as the extravagant or excessive expenditure of city funds above and beyond what is reasonably required to meet the needs of the city, or the consumption or use of city resources that is not knowingly authorized. Abuse is defined as the improper use of city resources in a manner contrary to law or city policy, or the improper use of one's position for private gain or advantage for themselves or any other person where not otherwise lawful.
Okay, thank you. So that is the technical definition that we have for waste, fraud, and abuse. And we do have the investigator from the unit. If you want to come forward, any comments regarding more responsibility and more work for you?
Well, Brian Young, Special Investigator with the Controller's Office. Actually, I want to thank the City Attorney's Office for putting this together, and it's, very comprehensive, and I think this is important for us to have going forward, in regards to encouraging more people to report, fraud, waste, and abuse to the units, so we can take a look at it. I mean, it's important not for, just us alone, but the city as a whole, that everybody's on the same team, and that, our mandate is to make sure that, we do everything we can to, investigate these types of matters.
And hopefully within a department, they can maintain control of the employees so it doesn't rise to this level. And in fact, if it does rise to this level, then we have the investigative resources available to go and do the investigation, and where the cards fall, they fall.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And your cooperation with the police department, your cooperation with the city attorney's office?
Very good cooperation. We meet with LAPD once a month. We also meet with the Ethics Commission, and we discuss investigative matters that we have, so we don't, step on each other's toes. So we make sure that, we're not duplicating efforts, and that appropriate investigations get to the proper venue who has jurisdiction and who can bring the best effort going forward. We also work with the City Attorney's Office, and occasionally we do work with the DA's office as well. We have had some cases where we have virtually completed investigations where we've actually directly referred them to the District Attorney's Office. So sometimes we do investigations that they're already more or less complete by the time we gather all of our information and make the appropriate recommendation as to whether it should be administrative versus a criminal matter.
And how widely used is the 800 number where we have for the controller's office, for the ethics? Can they report online as well as
Yes.
through the 800 number?
Yes, there's a 1-800 number, and it's also web-based. It's 24/7, and I believe there's over 100 different languages. If somebody calls in with a foreign language, they have the ability to talk to a live representative with an interpreter. And I believe that we receive about 300 calls per year. So the volume has been pretty consistent, but hopefully with the strengthening of, this ordinance, that will increase our call volume, so we'll have more additional matters to look into.
So while we're holding the general manager responsible, the employees are still responsible. An employee can make a notification through the online or through the 800 anonymous if they believe there's something going sideways in their department or another department.
Yes, that's correct. So we'll have another resource.
Heather? We just want to make sure we got this totally, completely covered.
I appreciate your thoroughness. Heather Holt again for the Ethics Commission. Yes, we have a similar situation. It is an 800 number, toll-free. It's also a number within the city so that someone can call from, within City Hall. It can also be reported by the internet 24 hours a day. We do not have the same kind of funding in terms of providing 150 different languages, but we do provide the option of letting someone speak with a live human being if that's what they would prefer.
I think all human beings would be live, wouldn't they?
Yes, well, in the best case scenarios, yes.
Okay.
And actually, in terms of numbers, we get about 400 to 600 calls every year.
400 to 600, 300. So almost maybe close to 1,000 that could come up to that number. Once the word gets out, it seems to generate more activity. And then
I'm just curious on that, Mr. Chair. Is there any coordination you guys can do so that your ability to get that kind of info could be shared with her ability to get that info?
I'll let the Ethics Commission speak in regards to their charter section.
There are a couple of charter sections that govern what we do with regard to the Whistleblower Hotline. First, we're required to have one, but we also have to maintain confidentiality with regard to any investigation that results from that. We do have, as Controller Brule mentioned, periodic meetings with the staff of the Controller's Office, and we do share with them information as another city agency when it becomes apparent to us in the course of an investigation that there are waste, fraud, and abuse issues that the Controller's Office would be interested in pursuing or at least knowing about, and they do the same for us.
Great.
So there is a cooperative relationship.
Yes.
And Chief, from the police department's position, referrals that go to the department, you folks then follow up on those, where there could be a criminal activity taking place, like stealing gasoline from a police station. Only 800 gallons stolen from a police station by a city employee.
For the police department,
Identify, please, your name.
Your name.
Deputy Chief Kirk Albanese, Chief of Detectives for the LAPD. For the police department, Detective Bureau has responsibility for public corruption citywide, and Commercial Crimes Division has that responsibility, directly has that responsibility for the police department. They answer to their commanding officer, who answers to me. And of course, we work with the district attorney's office in terms of those cases.
So there is a cooperative relationship with the city entities and the police department?
Yes.
And you don't have any problems pulling you out as far as that?
No, I don't have any problem, as long as we're notified when we have behavior that rises to the level of criminal activity.
And if they're in doubt, they can check and you'd verify?
Absolutely, and we'll be happy to provide that advice.
Great, okay. I think everybody's happy with that?
That's perfect.
Okay. We set to do this then? So we've got it all covered with the waste fraud abuse definitions, and we've made the modifications that have been requested. So with that, if there's any other questions, I don't see any questions, then we will recommend approval.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. Everybody's getting on the same wavelength. My biggest issue is going to be a sense of timing of when we get it all together, and we really feel 100% comfortable that we got it all together. So that's the report back time frame that I'm sure we'll get from you when it's appropriate.
Well, we're ready to go to council, aren't we? We got the ordinance written?
Well, because you're modifying the ordinance, a new one's going to have to be drafted. Additionally, this has been referred to two other committees. Either they'll have to waive or consider the matter.
Let's see if we can waive, because we're making some minor modifications which shouldn't.
To the ordinance, I'll talk with my management.
Who are the other two committees?
That would be Personnel and Animal Welfare and the Rules, Elections, and Intergovernmental Relations Committees.
Yes, Paul?
I believe the city attorney's office would draft the amendments now and be available for review of subsequent committees and council when it comes before them.
Okay. We could do that.
That's right.
We'd like to get this implemented as soon as possible for everyone's benefit, so if we could do that. I think it'll be beneficial. We've been working on this, and I want to thank the Controller's Office for
Beautiful.
persistence, and the Ethics Commission, Police Department, everybody's been involved. It's been, as we've heard cases come before, we hit the news with the news reports, this, that, and the other. I mean, public is tired of hearing this waste, fraud, and abuse. They want to see a professionally run operation in the city and working for the taxpayers who are footing the bill. So, okay, Mr. Clerk, you got it?
Okay.
Make it work?
We'll make it work.
Okay, very well. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we got one item left, and that is Mr. Budd.
Item number 2, controller reports relative to the Controller's audit of Department of Building and Safety Management controls.
Come on, Bud, stand up here with these ladies.
Come on, bud. young man.
Dave Laura's screaming out the back door. Frank Bush is running out the back door.
There it is. What a collection.
Ray's bailing out the window.
So what is your date of birth anyhow?
6/15/45.
Yeah, that's 1 month, younger than me. I'm May 15.
He looks much younger than you too, though.
Child.
All right. Controllers report relative controls out Department of Building Safety, and you are going to take it away.
Good afternoon, honorable council members. My name is Vicky Ann Cajas from the Controller's Office. On October 2012, our office released a report entitled The Audit of Department of Building and Safety's Management Controls. The objective of the audit was to evaluate the controls of the department in performing their core services, namely the plan check, inspection, and code enforcement, as well as the administrative services that support their core functions. We also evaluated the status of the department's proposed governance reforms and considered a proposal to consolidate code enforcement activities in a single department. Our audit covered the period July 2010 up to April 2012. Overall, we found that the Department of Building and Safety has made good efforts in establishing management controls that are necessary in carrying out their core functions. Our audit found that the controls over its operation could be strengthened to facilitate effectiveness. Our evaluation of the recent reforms of the DBS disclosed that while the reform efforts were substantially executed, management should exercise diligence to ensure that they remain implemented. Also, there appears to be opportunity for organizational change in consolidating the city's enforcement activities. The key findings of the audits are as follows. We noted some control deficiencies in the department's calculation of plan check and permit fees. The department did not consistently bill permit and related plan check fees in accordance with the Los Angeles Municipal Code provisions. As a result, DBS appears to be overbilling some customers and others were undercharged, which shortchanging the permittees and the cities as a whole. DBS did not ensure that only applicable fees are billed and only bill the minimum fees for work valued at less than $500. We also found that DBS did not update valuation and permit fee tables on a regular basis to keep it current and complete with accurate building cost data and valuation amounts. DBS permit system lacks adequate controls over the supplemental permit issuance. For new construction, DBS did not always conduct required follow-up inspections to determine whether cited safety or building code violations have been corrected. DBS did not consistently evaluate major modifications reported by fabricators or testing agencies, nor collected the required modification fees before issuing the license renewal and in its approval. This results in a risk that the quality of fabricated materials used in construction were in accordance with or were meeting the building code requirements. For existing building code structures, DBS did not respond to customer complaints regarding potential code enforcement violations in a timely manner and did not always conduct required follow-up inspections to determine whether cited code enforcement violations had been corrected. Also, properties that have been abated under the vacant building abatement program were not inspected for a year or more. These deficiencies may result in citywide blight and may compromise the safety of city residents and its visitors. In connection with the proposed reforms in 2011, DBS management began an internal investigation that ultimately resulted in termination of employees that were confirmed to be involved in soliciting bribes. The mayor, in order to determine that any wrongdoing will be stopped, directed DBS to continue its review and implement measures in order to stop such corruption or abuse. Such measures include establishment of internal investigation unit, conduct performance audits of its employees in the inspection, engineering, and code enforcement, update existing systems and activate a GPS tracking system, review hiring standards, investigate the background practices, evaluation and training programs for inspectors and their supervisors. As part of this audit, we independently evaluated the proposed reforms that the DBS implemented, and we found that most of the proposed reforms had been executed by the department. However, to be effective, they need to consistent implementation, strengthening, improvement, and modification. Regarding consolidation of the city's code enforcement activities, currently, the Housing Department and the Department of Building and Safety are doing code enforcement activities. The DBS Code Enforcement Bureau is involved in enforcing building, mechanical, plumbing, and other code enforcement activities to ensure that the building structure are safe. For the Housing Department, their code enforcement function involved identifying and facilitating multifamily residential rental buildings to ensure that they are maintained in habitable condition. Based on our review, to improve oversight, coordination, customer service, we recommend that the existing code enforcement operation at the Housing Department be transferred to the Department of Building and Safety. The results of our audit included 40 recommendations addressed to the Department of Building and Safety. Based on their proposed action plans, we determined that 5 recommendations to be implemented and the remaining 35 recommendations to be in progress.
The big question, of course, I have is, by transferring it over, what's your logic in transferring that function over?
We believe that with that function, the code enforcement activities being transferred to the Department of Building and Safety, there will be improved oversight because there will be only one department looking at that code enforcement activities for all the cities, multifamily, single family, and all types of building structures. Customer service will be improved.
In addition, that will also improve the oversight, and it will also eliminate duplication of efforts.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my question was, as you were coming back in, was why do they want to transfer it over? What is the value in transferring it over? And they're giving a good explanation on why they feel that's strongly about transferring it over to Building and Safety. You might want to just say it one more time for the chair to hear that again.
Well, it will be, like the benefit of transferring LAH, this code enforcement function, to DBS is to improve coordination between departments. It will also improve oversight, service delivery, customer service, and it will eliminate any duplication of efforts.
Now, what if it's the Building and Safety Department that has the cook in it? How do you deal with that?
What was that again, sir?
If the person in Building and Safety that it might be transferred to as a responsibility.
It will still be a standalone program within Department of Building and Safety. So we don't really see any significant cost savings because all the people and resources will be transferred to DBS, and it will be a standalone function within DBS.
Okay.
Bud, what do you think about this?
I have been scrupulously agnostic.
Well, that's good. You're a politician.
Sounds like one.
Well, I know there's been problems with HD. There's been problems with HECLA. I mean, there's been scandals, shall we say. And Building Safety's had their issues, too. So it's when you look at the broad scope, it's like street services. If it's on the sidewalk, it's street services. If it's after the sidewalk, it's Building Safety. You know, that sidewalk seems to be a dividing line. The street services, Building and Safety, and then if no one's responsible, but if everyone's responsible, no one gets anything done. The concern is, how do we coordinate it? How do we focus it? How do we make it more efficient, more effective for the benefit of the people of Los Angeles? I mean, you got a department that had some issues, and you've been in there rolling your sleeves up, making an improvement. You get Frank Bush, who looks like an undercover detective, is the chief of building inspection, building safety, as the enforcement. He's the enforcement man, and he does a great job with that. You put the right people in place to get things done. This is obviously something that is a whole new ballgame.
And we're working very closely in both cases. On the situation with us on code enforcement and the housing department on code enforcement, them doing mainly habitability and us doing structural. We have, through a lot of work of Ray Chan and Rushmore Cervantes, developed a pretty detailed document, business letter between us of how it works, so that we have very clear for the public, for ourselves, very clear definitions of this part of it's yours, this part of it's ours. There are times when we work together. So even though I've been agnostic, because it's a policy decision for the council and the mayor as to the configuration of the departments, we'll do whatever you want. But we do work very hard to make sure that we do have a very spelled out, written out, delineated relationship between us and LHD on code enforcement. Same with Public Works, Bureau of Street Services. Ray and I just had a meeting with them recently. You know, the example you give is exactly right, that there's this magic line at the property line, and there's some things that can cross over. For example, a yard sale. A person could be having a yard sale, and the yard sale could be in violation, and if it's on the private property, we come and cite them, and if they have couches and shirts and DVDs that spill over onto the sidewalk and onto the curb, then another inspector comes in and cites them. So what we've worked out is a reciprocity, that if we spot it, we'll cite them on the private property, and we'll go ahead and cite them on the public property, and if they see it, they'll cite it on the public and cite it on the private. So we're working on things like that of mutual cooperation. We back up each other and support each other.
Which benefits everyone, because I know that the senior lead officers out in the valley, they're calling it Frank Bush. I call Frank Bush constantly Frank.
You're welcome to do so. I'll give you his home number.
I already have.
Okay,
I
thank you.
have that 7-day-a-week number. And we had an issue in Woodland Hills in Candy Cane Lane where we had complaints from the residents regarding some illegal activity. And Frank was out there with his enforcement. Then he went out there doing enforcement on the weekends, above and beyond the call of duty. And the constituents are very happy, because when they call, they expect it to be done next day. They don't anticipate and they don't understand the wait. So, I mean, your enforcement branch has been great. How we combine that with the resources and how we combine that with the senior lead officers, with the police department, and if some senior leads knew the rules and regulations, they cite them in the court on the citation, on the greenie or the other one that they can cite people. The more people involved in the process, then you don't have to keep on sending street services and then building and safety and then LAPD and then the fire department. It just, this duplication, just get it done the quickest way, move on to the next challenge. I mean, they had a nice program in the police department with the senior leads where they would cite individuals, and it would cooperative effort with the city attorney's office. It would go straight in. City attorney's office was great in prosecuting those with the neighborhood prosecutors, those quality of life issues. And that's, I think, what people want to see. But when it comes to this, which is obviously something that the mayor would have to obviously move on, we would make a recommendation. My philosophy is the consolidation works for everyone's benefit. Like if you folks work with street services, it benefits them, benefits you. Why send two folks out to the same thing? Instruct the CAO to look at this. CAO, look at this. This just
It's going to
ended
be
me.
budgetary and
Well, it's obviously the budget, because it would have to help your budget to do more, but to share those responsibilities.
As the city controller's office pointed out, they would, even if they were consolidated, they'd be maintained as two distinct units because they'd have different funding sources. Housing gets SCEP money, the Systematic Code Enforcement Program, so they get an annual fee from the owners of multifamily property to pay for those inspections. The code enforcement we have is done straight out of the city's general fund.
Right.
So they are two parts of a similar effort, but they do have separate funding sources, and we'd always have to scrupulously adhere to those separation.
That reminds me, my district office representative contacted me a couple days ago that there's a apartment building, and consistently when the tenants move out, they put the couches and the TVs on the curb.
I hate that.
Didn't we assess apartment owners, apartment buildings, a fee for that large pickup?
Let me have Frank nearby, and while Frank's walking up, and I'll have him answer that. Why don't you let Frank have that chair just for a second? Let me just say, as you well know, the reason that code enforcement works so well is because we do have Frank Bush. I'm very fortunate as a general manager to have some really great bureau chiefs. They're all here today. Frank is the best of the best. He's really doing a great job for us. his budget, so all your kind comments, please remember those the next budget hearing, because his budget has been decimated, and it continues to operate because of his extraordinary efforts. So the question was, when they have couches, bulky items, how do we make the scufflaws pay rather than general fund pay?
You know, I'm not really sure what the fees were that were assessed on the apartments because we were not directly involved in them. I did hear some discussions about that in the past. I do know that Bureau of Sanitation and Public Works, will go out and pick them up and then try to find out who's been doing the dumping. They have the illegal dumping unit to find out who's actually doing it and then cite them and go after them for costs.
Well, it seems with apartment owners, at least what my office is, and from the district office, is that certain apartments, when the tenants move out, they take the items that the people don't take with them, and they put them on the curb, and then they call, there's bulk item pickup in front of our apartment building. It seems that the same buildings are continuing to have this process, and I thought at one time, it may have been Councilmember Labange that was pushing through some ordinance that each apartment building would be assessed a certain amount of money to help take care of that cost. It's always TVs and couches and dining room sets. It's not just a couple little furniture items.
Let us follow up, but you're saying it's a Bureau of Street Services.
I'm not positive.
We'll find out.
We need to find out.
It's on that side of the magic line. Like you said, it's on that side of the magic line.
And it's the same apartments that seem to generate the same amount of trash. You drive down the street. In fact, yesterday I'm driving down, I see couches and one of those big TV sets sitting there. So I, call it in, and then there's another bulky item pickup. But I thought apartments, because I know that the homeowner, obviously, you don't have that much transfer in the homes where they'll stay there. And then once in a while, they'll call for a large item pickup. But the apartments seem to have a turnover of tenants. And when they leave, if they leave big items in there, whoever manages it, well, let's put it on the street and call the city and have them pick it up. There's a cost to that. So we need to look into that and see if there's actually or are we within charge of that apartment building or something. I mean, I don't want to start assessing new fees, but someone's going to have to pay for that.
Well, and I agree with you on not assessing new fees, but when we are in such a general fund crisis, it's not right that John Q. taxpayers through the general fund should have to pay it. For the people who are doing this should pay for it. The violators of the law should pay for it. In this case, it sounds like it might very well be a landlord who says, by the way, the city will come and pick it up. Here's the phone number, put it out there, and the city will pick it up through their trash fees.
Well, yeah, if it's in the trash can, great, but when it's always a bulky item.
Yeah, we'll go. It's not ours, but we'll follow up on it. And we'll report back to the committee.
So I think the CAO needs to look at this to see what we can do. Another note handed to me. I guess you can instruct. I'm going to instruct the CAO to look at the feasibility of consolidating this with LAHD code enforcement for improved efficiencies, which is a good idea. I think that as long as the funding's there and you got the great leadership to make it happen, and you need to grow one of these, Bud, because it's like it seems with the
I'm inspired. I'm inspired.
It's the wisdom that they have. But I think that would satisfy what we're trying to accomplish, and with the controller's audit, 5 recommendations are considered implemented. 3 are listed as not yet implemented, and the remainder considered in progress. So,
as of now, all the remaining are in progress.
Okay, so they're making progress.
Yes, they submitted an updated.
And Bud's been a very good general manager. He started in Burbank and he moved over after Johnny Carson left to Los Angeles and trying to continue that process. So no, I think it's good. It's a cumbersome, difficult task. There was one question about fees, though. The one question I came in here, you mentioned about fees. If they were overcharged, or applicants overcharged filing fees, 27 miscellaneous fees, or permit fees valued less than 500, have they been refunded? Have we refunded the fees where people were overcharged?
If I may, Ray Chan, Executive Officer, Department of Building Safety, there is isolated situations because we overcharge on the $27. It's a fee that we charge on permits less than $500. It's a matter of because we have some multiple permit situation for one job, and we did not do a very good job in this particular case to cross-reference all the permits for this job. So it's just our fault, and Controller's Office pointed out, and we are closing the loophole.
Okay, the question was, have we refunded any money that we might have overcharged?
But if we overcharge them, we should refund the money.
Yes, absolutely.
At least we should attempt to every way we possibly
Absolutely.
try and refund that. And I don't know if this was discovered when I was in the restroom, but Build LA, why does it take you so long to get off the ground? Build LA?
Well, it's Build LA, for everybody else's information, is the technology component of the mayor's development reform that we're trying to better use technology. This is a very big city. Geographically, it's big. Population, it's big. We can't do everything hand-holding, and so we're trying to use better technology to have a virtual consolidated department through the better use of technology. You know, those who work with technology, it's very expensive. It's very expensive and very time-consuming. Before I came here, we were just in a meeting with Michael LeGrand and Gary Lee Moore and John Reamer, and we're working on the final stages of that now. But you're going to be seeing a proposal very soon, and I think it's about $15 million to streamline the technology between all of these departments. And the example I use, if you just 2 more minutes, is what you can do with technology. Look at like Travelocity. If you want to go on a trip, you can go to one portal and you can get a variety of selection of hotels. You can go on the same portal and get a variety of selection of rental cars, go on the same portal and get a variety of selection of airlines. You should be able to come into one portal with the City of LA and get to the planning department and get to the building and safety department and get to the Bureau of Street Services. That kind of technology exists. It just exists in the private sector more than it does in the public sector. So we're trying to bring that into our world. It just is very expensive, and I tell people, I see too many government agencies where they try it, they screw it up, and they spend $100 million and it doesn't work. And I have promised our people I will take them to the top of the 13th floor and throw them off individually.
Why not the 26th floor?
Because this is big bucks, you have to do it right.
Yeah, I agree. And then the other question is, what has the department done to stop abuse by the inspectors? What protocols that have been put in place to ensure that abuse does not occur again? We know about the situation that occurred in the past. So we got programs in place now to make sure?
I think we have excellent programs. The key to that, to me, is you never assume you've got it covered. You never drop your guard. You always keep constant vigilance. You never say you've got the problem solved. You're always on the lookout. But some of the things that you're aware of, we've reestablished the Office of the Independent Investigator, Martha Supernor, former LAPD, former State Attorney General. So we have a dedicated special investigator, an employee of the Personnel Department, but paid for by us. We've instituted, we're in the second generation of the mandatory rotations. We like to rotate all of our people, 20% of our people every year, so that every 5 years people are reported so they don't get too ingrained in a given area. We have got the geo-tracking system here. I can even keep track of where Frank Bush is. All of our phones have been equipped with geo-tracking. We have not yet activated them because we're still meeting conferring with the employee associations on consequences, on impacts, but we're geared up and ready to go on that. So we've made a number of those reforms that I think are paying off well. I feel very good about where we are, but you never let down your guards. You never take it for granted. It's constant vigilance.
That's good. I know that you were in there to clean it up, and you've obviously been diligent in making that happen. Mr. Bill?
Yeah, just anecdotally, because I don't want to get into particulars here. There's been a particular project in my district that you're aware of, where the apartment owner first came to me and said that they were putting him into a bribe mode.
What do you mean, what?
Into a bribery mode. And of course, I said, bribes are no good, period, no matter what the story is.
In the committee report.
A duck that quacks like a duck is a duck. And so the bottom line is unacceptable behavior. The department has been working on it. The two departments have been getting engaged. And what seemed to be the problem was right hand, left hand. Right hand wasn't telling the left hand what they were doing, and left hand didn't tell the right hand. So there were some legitimate apartment owner issues there. Then the alleged person that solicited the bribe chilled out for a while because he saw action happening. I've never met these people, so it's all a third party that your department has been involved in. I know you can't talk about the particulars, but how does this fit within what we're talking about here as a way to deal with unethical behavior by people in these departments?
Well, in all of these cases, the minute we get an allegation, we go to the independent investigator, Martha Supernor, 20 years of experience, well-equipped at this, deals with the FBI as needed, deals with the LAPD as needed. So
Right.
we have built in the mechanisms to deal with it. And I only can't speak to that specific case publicly like we are. But one of the things we do notice is it's just going to happen every time somebody, not every time, often when a person now is not happy with what an inspector says, the first allegation, well, you must be on the take.
Of
You know,
course.
It's just an easy out, you know. So we have to really watch for that. So sometimes it's an easy charge to make, but we take them all serious. We pursue all of them. You have my absolute assurance that we don't take anything for granted.
That's great. I appreciate
Has she
it.
been busy?
She's very busy.
Okay, so there are things that she's
Yeah.
definitely working on.
Yes.
Well, actually, she's not just busy, but since we hired her about a year ago, she must have encountered at least 20 of these different cases, and she looked into all these cases, and so far, none of these complaints are valid.
Well, I know one thing the police department has done is the in-car video. The
Yes.
in-car video, when they make a stop, it records exactly what's happening. Someone then goes into the police station and make a complaint, the officer did this or that. Let's look at the video.
Yep.
All of a sudden, those complaints, 90% of them, well, I guess it didn't really happen that way. So it's protecting the officers, it's avoiding the litigation, it's avoiding the process of cumbersome investigations, because someone makes an allegation, big investigation takes place. That in-car video has saved the city a lot of resources as far as time and effort, and we're trying to expand that citywide just because of the cost savings with the internal investigations. I mean, that traffic stop is there, the lights go on, bam, it's all recorded, so it's a very effective way. Obviously, you can't do that with your inspector.
Yeah, we had that same discussion with the city attorney, because the city attorney, after we started encountering these problems, I went out and met with everybody to look for good ideas, met with you, and when I met with the city attorney, one of his recommendations was we look at the on-dash camera. The problem our people have is they're off checking the water, they're on the roof, they're in the basement, you know.
Yeah.
For the most part, the patrol car has the suspect vehicle right in front of it. So we would love to have that, but our work just doesn't lend itself to that as easily.
It wouldn't seem realistic, but it's nice to know that, at least in the police department, it's saving, and that saves a lot of resources and the time and the value of the personnel, which is important. So what we're going to do is note and file this with an instruction for the CAO to look into the feasibility of consolidation of your Alcides Building and Safety into the LAHD enforcement, code enforcement for improved efficiencies. So, Paul, you got that?
And Mr. Chairman,
Got that? Mr. Rosenthal joins me in that. Sorry, Paul?
could I make one statement?
Sure, bud, yeah.
I want to thank the City Controller's Office, and I want to thank your committee. We feel that we do work very hard to run a good department. There's always room for improvement. There's always lessons to be learned. We think the City Controller's Office was very fair with us, brought some things to our attention. We think we've addressed those, and we appreciate on this matter and on the criminal problems we have, we appreciate the work of your committee to help us air these things publicly.
But it's a cooperative effort, and there'll be just a couple bad apples in the batch, and you know what? We respond to that accordingly. So, but you've obviously taken the bull by the rings to continue it, and I can't compliment Frank enough when it comes to his dedication. Frank Bush is, and he lives in my district, so maybe that's why he's. He does live in the district. He's lived there a long time.
Must be good water.
Right.
There's good water out there. He does a great job. But to go out on the weekend because of these complaints from the Woodland Hills Candy Cane Lane, and he was able to eradicate those. Yeah, very, very.
Remember us at budget.
What?
Remember us at
We'll
budget.
remember you.
I'll remember you guys. No, definitely, definitely. So with that, Bill, anything else?
No, I think it's great.
Mr. Clerk?
Just general public comment.
Public comment? Anybody from public comment? You haven't filled out a card. If you haven't filled out a card, we're not going to listen because there's nothing to say because you're not here to say anything? That was so quick. No, is there any public comment? We don't have any cards on public comment. Dr. Weissman had one, but Dr. Weissman has left. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.